Well, it's an absolute honour and joy to be with you today, and I'm sure you're very moved and touched by the film. It's very powerful, and I've seen it I don't know how many times, and it's still emotionally, I still feel a lot when I see it. And I remember there's a line in the film where I say, or Pat says, that we've been now speaking together in public 50 times. Well, it's now 150. So that shows how many years. It must be about 5-6 years ago now. When I see some of the other people in the film, they are mostly my friends. I've been to Palestine and seen Bassam there, and Rami and Robbie. In fact, Robbie and Bassam were recently in London. I went to London to meet them. The guy from Rwanda, Jean-Baptiste, he's become a really good friend. And the guy from Derry. So I actually feel very fortunate that they are my support group. They are those that inspire me. And also, all these years since I've met Pat and worked with him, it's now coming up to 15 years. And I didn't meet Pat, as you can gather, to change him. I met him to change myself. It was about my healing. And after all these years, I'm really grateful for what I'm learning and still learning, and I'm being transformed through the relationship that we have. It's sort of an unusual friendship, I call it. I don't really know what the name is. And nothing could bring back my dad. That's the past. But this is about creating a different future. And it may take a long time to make the changes. And that man in the film, the reporter for the local paper, who's a little bit kind of aggressive, did you pick that up? So there's a bit of editing with that bit, like they are in films. But he asked that question about what are we all getting out of it. Actually, everyone else in that room got a lot. And they carry on. And what I love about it is that we're not telling people they should forgive, they should reconcile. It's not about that. It's about sharing together in a vulnerable way, sharing our story. And then people take it where they want to take it. And I know people who haven't forgiven and they're incredibly compassionate, and people who have forgiven and they're incredibly compassionate. I'm not even sure it's about forgiving. It's about, for me, transformation. It's about moving from feeling that pain to transforming it into my passion for peace. And we all have our own way of doing it. And I'm grateful to Pat. I'm grateful for, I mean, you can see in the film that it's hard for him to meet me. It was much easier when he was there in this place of righteousness, which is how he arrived, you know. I'm okay because I'm part of the oppressed, and we had to use violence. So I'm okay. And then he realized he wasn't okay. And more he knows what a wonderful man that my dad was, and the effects on me, because I've had secondary trauma and other things have happened. I'm still healing, and he knows all of that. I remember my middle daughter, she had a message for him, a question, and she said, this is when she was about 7, she said, ask Pat, when he planted that bomb, didn't he see my granddad Tony in the hotel? And Pat said, no, I saw no one. And I deeply regret that. And he could not kill him now, knowing what he knows. I remember the first time we spoke in public, we had like 5 minutes to speak, that was all. And he said, I now know I could have sat down and had a cup of tea with Joe's dad. That's so simple. And the Conservative government weren't into having cups of tea with the IRA, I can tell you that. But I can imagine them, the two of them, sitting together and talking and dialoguing. How much better would that have been? But in order for that to happen, each side would have had to stop demonizing the other. And for me, that's a choice. There's a choice every day. Am I going to see the humanity in every single person? Am I going to open my heart to see everyone has their story and suspend my judgment? Or am I going to blame and judge? And sometimes When I'm feeling pain, that's what I want to do. I want to make someone else responsible. Some of you have that feeling, like, you know, it's kind of the first response. And I'm getting better at having the self-awareness to stop giving that response some energy. But it doesn't always work. I'm still learning. So now I'd like to open this up to any questions, any responses, anything that you're feeling from the film. And I think we have a roving microphone.
Is this working? Can you hear me? Yes. All right.
Yeah.
I'm Haley Hyatt with the Institute for Sustainable Social Change here at Prescott College. And I just want to say thank you for being here and how pleased we are to be the venue for this conversation. So thank you all for coming tonight. We are recording this. So as Paul mentioned earlier, if you have a question, I'll bring you the mic. And if you'll speak into the mic, that would be perfect. Thanks. This is such a fun job.
This is a comment, and I am bothered by people who don't see Muslims as individuals, and all of the refugees that are going to other countries, and people are afraid that they're terrorists. And then you look at the pictures of them passing into other borders, and they're people. They're individuals, and a lot of young people. And I just want to say that it hurts my heart that it didn't end with the movie, that we're living it now.
Thank you. It's really important to have in this space to say that right now that suffering is happening and we're all responsible for it. I really believe that. So thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
I would like to also add my thanks to your being with us and to piggyback, if you will, on something you've just shared, and that is that one of my significant concerns these days is how we as Americans have, in my lifetime, shifted our demonization, if you will, of what used to be the Soviet Union and the East Bloc countries, communism, to now the Arab world and Iran. And I just would like to relate a story that happened to me 10 days after 9/11. I was scheduled to fly out of Sky Harbor, and I kept my flight. And the airport was virtually empty. And when I arrived at my gate early, there was one woman sitting in the waiting area, and she was in chador. She was veiled. And there were two airline representatives talking rather frantically on a phone. And it turned out that she had missed a flight into New York from Tehran. And so she was delayed, and the people who were helping her weren't with her. So I said to the airline employees, would you like me to just say hello to her? One of my college roommates she still is, Iranian from Tehran. And I know a little Farsi. And so I went and sat with the woman. And she was clearly so relieved. And I don't speak Farsi. I'm not fluent at all. But at least I could be with her, be present with her. And as I was sitting with her, we were facing due east, and the planes were landing. And I started to weep because I had worked steadily from 9/11. I hadn't allowed myself to have feelings about what had happened, and I just wept. My undergraduate degree is in contemporary Arab politics, and I felt the futility of so much that's happened in my lifetime in that part of the world. And so anyway, other people came, we got on the plane, we sat together on the plane, we got to San Jose, and her adult daughter came and greeted her. We were at the carousel, and her daughter came with her mother to me and said, thank you so much for being with my mother. She's so grateful. But then she said she wondered why you were weeping. And I tried to explain my sense of sadness, just profound, tragic sadness. And the woman put her hands on my face and smiled really beatifically, and she said, don't worry, everything will be all right. She's saying that to me. So that was a moment of grace for me. And I guess it's maybe off topic a little bit, but I think it's about one-on-one, seeing people as people, heart to heart, you know, really not allowing ourselves to demonize, especially out of our ignorance for other cultures.
Oh, I really thank you for sharing. That's a very powerful story, and it's so relevant to today. You know, it just shows like the power of what we can all do to reach out to someone else. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Joe, a motivational question from the event of your father's passing to, say now, just as a point in time.
Yeah.
What was the motivation that moved you through that particular time frame to do it as against just sitting with this anger, rage, whatever? What moved you to move on to this next step?
So, within 2 days of the bomb going off, I didn't feel I could carry on being the person I had been before the bomb. I felt part of the conflict in Northern Ireland, and I moved from being like a free spirit who had no responsibilities to just feeling the weight, the enormity of the conflict. And their pain was my pain. I couldn't put that away. And I decided 2 days later to bring something positive out of it and to understand those who killed my dad. So I was just 27. I didn't know what that meant. You know, I didn't even know where to go. I didn't know anyone else who'd undertaken such a journey. Most of my friends at the time were more into inner peace, and they just told me to sort of let go, really. They didn't help that much. So I was very on my own with this, but I trusted. And the trust being there all the time, that life was going to bring me the experiences. And of course, journeys aren't in a straight line. I went several areas of kind of like going backwards and down and getting lost. But things did happen. The first thing that happened was within 6 weeks, where I ended up being in quite a kind of scary part of London, getting home, and there were no taxis and the tube stopped, and there was someone else looking for a taxi, so we ended up sharing a taxi. We were going roughly the same way. And I could tell he was from Ireland. He had an Irish accent. So in the taxi I said to him, I said, my father's just been killed by the IRA, and that I was wanting to understand. And he said, my brother was in the IRA, and my brother was killed by a British soldier last year. So there we were. We should have been enemies. We came from different sides of the conflict, which was still very violent at that time. And yet we spoke of a world where peace was possible, where no one got killed, where nobody killed, where there was the humanity of everyone acknowledged. And I remember leaving that taxi, and I haven't seen that guy ever since. I wonder where he is sometimes. But I remember leaving the taxi and thinking, I can build a bridge across the divide. And that really helped me. And then I went to Belfast in 85 and 86 and began to meet people. And so the journey carried on. But also maybe I need to say that before the bomb went off, I'd written an essay for a competition on the relevance of Gandhi's views on non-violence. Gandhi. So I was already thinking about what is non-violence, what is peace. And that set me on a direction of where I wanted to go. But it didn't actually help with the emotional learning and the emotional work. That came a lot later. But I think the person that I was before influenced quite a quick decision, really, within 2 days to understand those who killed my father. I thought if I didn't do that, I was going to lose twice. Lose my dad and lose my humanity. And I had an enemy. That was the problem. When the bomb went off, there was someone there who was an enemy. So that did take away my humanity, and this was about getting it back. It took me a long time, but I'm getting there, kind of like, you know.
Oh, we'll come over that side next.
I thought a neat part of the film was, okay, we're breaking a cycle. And in the forgiveness, it isn't perpetuating this killing, or
Yeah.
some leaders that want to do this, or some radicals, and allowing people to talk about it. We all want to hear why, or how could you? And maybe you can hear a different side of the story and get some forgiveness, but it was beautiful, very beautifully put. And I thought another thing that today, lawyers, don't you dare go talk to the people that you just killed their children in a car accident, because you're going to say something wrong, or you're going to do something. Those people just have to carry that and be eaten from inside for so long. It's so nice to get that process changed and broken up and break that cycle.
Yeah, right. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it seems that, you know, the victim's hurt twice. And for a lot of victim survivors, there is that need. They want to have that conversation. And I feel the courts, and they just need to be supporting that. But of course, that would be focusing on the healing of the victim survivor, and that's not always the most important thing. In the court, it's more about punitive justice, and well, you all know that as mediators, but I know that restorative justice is something that's growing here, and I think that gives me such hope that it is happening in many parts of the world. And restorative justice to me brings real healing and real change. Yeah. This is a little surreal, yeah. Did anyone
as one of the
order
ones
pizza?
who's working on bringing restorative justice practices to Prescott, I was intrigued with the path that you took to learn the skills that you applied in this intricate process. You read Gandhi. Had you read anything about restorative justice or practices?
I think at that time I hadn't heard about restorative justice, and what really helped me was back in about '92. I had one daughter, another one on the way, and I realised I didn't want to parent in the same way I was parented, though I completely understand my parents, how they did it, and they did a great job, but I wanted to do it differently. I wanted to do like a non-blame parenting. And I end up training and supporting parents in learning how to listen to their children, how to see the need behind the behaviour, how to listen, acknowledge emotions, not to label. And I think that training that I had meant that when I was with Patrick at the first meeting, I knew what it meant to really listen to him, to be there, almost to create a safe place for him to open up. And while I was listening to him, I was listening to myself and managing different thoughts and different emotions. And I think that's what enabled him. He said he was disarmed in that moment because of the empathy. And it wasn't that I was practicing skills consciously, it was just happening. You can see on the film, there's on the couch, that is the second meeting we ever had. The first meeting wasn't filmed, but 2 weeks later, the second meeting was. And I think even from that shot, you can't see the words, but you can see some of the intensity there. I don't think I've ever listened to anyone so intently in all my life. Yeah.
So in your experience, both of you experienced profound neediness by events that you did not anticipate. And through your communication, you reached a point of mutual comprehension, which sounds like what you were doing with your children.
Yeah.
What did that feel like, and would you use that to describe the relationship that you've had with Pat since that time, a mutual comprehension?
Well, I've reached a place of empathizing so much that I don't know if I lived his life, I would have made the same choices. I don't know. And in that moment, it's not even about forgiveness, it's about empathy and understanding. And he definitely empathizes with me very much. And we have a challenge, which is that he still has a sense that what he did back in 1984 was the only thing he could do. And he's always going back and looking at it. And sometimes he's very fluid and says that maybe there was other options. And sometimes he's much more like, nope, we definitely had to do that. And so that makes it sort of interesting still, because I'm having to carry on with the work. And I have said to him sometimes that I'm feeling triggered, I might say I'm feeling upset, I'm feeling scared sometimes, because of the way he's talking about the past. And can he talk about it in a different way? And we've had this conversation in public. We actually had that conversation with a group from Palestine and Israel, from the Combatants for Peace, and it was in the north of England. And they were absolutely thrilled we were having problems because it helped them know that actually this is really tough work, and it is. So it's not like we reached a point where it's the end and everything's fine. And recently we spoke an amazing small interfaith group in London, and someone said to Pat, so isn't it great Joe's forgiven you? And Pat said to everyone, oh, Joe hasn't forgiven me. And I said, what would it look like to you if I have? You know, like, he doesn't feel like he deserves to be forgiven. He doesn't think I have. And yet he completely trusts me and knows I care about him. So there's complexities there. And I'm kind of okay with that. You know, it's like I'm learning, it's changing. We're not saying the same story all the time, and because I think that wouldn't work. You know, so. And I sometimes think about restorative justice process. And we broke all the kind of, you know, the rules. We had no one there before, no one there after, no one in the room. And I sometimes think that would have been very helpful. But then also there was something about that rawness and that vulnerability of just the two of us. I mean, I think it could have gone another way, but it went really well.
Congratulations on the journey and for sharing it with us. It's so special.
Thank you.
You've found a peace in which you can explore your enmity without having conflict. It's a beautiful thing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Oh. Yes, I'm a bit hungry. You can bring the pizza back.
I'm not sure if I can say this clearly. This is a nugget of hope. I'm an Army wife, 25 years. The struggles, the damaged lives that I have seen and witnessed in those years. I just lost my husband a year ago, consequences of Agent Orange. I have some anger and some resolution to do, but in 25 years, I've seen the damages of our rush to war. And this is a nugget of hope on an individual basis, and I wish that it could be our politicians and our countries learning how to dialogue rather than rush to war, because there's too many damaged lives out there. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
On the heels of something that you said just a while back, I was really, can you hear me? Is that better? Watching Rwanda, I was really struck with a certain deeper wisdom than I expected in their process. For better or for worse, however they did those prosecutions and all of that, there seemed like some basic wisdom in having the people work together to build those homes. You know, as long as the distance can remain, even in a little town or anywhere, the resolution doesn't happen. So, you know, just being clear over here so far away and hearing the atrocities and, you know, you're just like rolling your eyes at these people's minds and why are they doing these things, to hear some wisdom in their process that they work together on the houses, that really struck me. I was impressed by it.
Thank you. It is impressive. I was there in Rwanda about 4 years ago, and it is extraordinary what they're achieving there. You know, and obviously there are challenges still, massive challenges, but I think how far they've come is a measure of just how amazing they are. So yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, that's a great question. We're selling some DVDs at the end over there. How much are we selling them for? $15. And also there's I'm not a poet, but I wrote one poem, and it was just before I met Pat, and it was about meeting him, and I shared it at the first meeting, and I'm sure it was part of the reason that he just felt so heard. And there's some copies there which we're giving for like a donation. I have a charity, and so the money will go towards continuing the work, and the work that I'm doing now is very much about the area of violent extremism, and I'm speaking a lot and working with different groups, and it's interesting from some of the early comments that the people who really are welcoming and working with me are the Muslim communities in Europe, in the UK, that they really need to hear, and we're doing incredible work with other organisations as well to stop the demonisation and to work with young people at risk of being radicalised. Rather than just telling them that they shouldn't go to Syria, we're looking at other ways of creating positive change, so they can be positive change makers. Because actually the emotions are really understandable, it's where they go with the emotions. So we're looking at creating programs so young people can really be positive change makers in their community.
Just after hearing the last comment about Rwanda, a connection that I'm making for myself are the comments in the movie. The man who was in prison, who committed atrocities, said that if he saw the other man's mother, he would ask her for money. And I'm struck by how often poor people can be moved to such actions and activities that none of us would otherwise engage in, having the comforts that we have in America and in Europe. And you think you could never do such atrocities. However, one of the psychologists said, we have all of those eyes within us to defend our families, to get food, to protect our land. And so I think it's on another level, it's important for us to remember the inequities that drive people to madness. And the last comment of the film, the woman who had lost 5 children, said that she would share her food.
I know.
So I'm very moved by that statement. And so it's another level for us to consider.
Thank you.
I'll just say something. The piece that stood out for me was hearing each other's painful stories. And that's, to me, at the very bottom of all the things that we're doing with restorative justice is that's what we're doing. The willingness to hear each other's painful stories. And thank you for bringing the film here so that we can share in that.
Thank you.
I just want to say that how moving the film is, the way that it has touched everyone, and Joe's story, that doesn't have to stop with tonight. One of the reasons that I was very interested in bringing this here along with the Interfaith Council is to see what else could happen in this community. And one of the things I know for sure is that my friend Nancy Vandervoort over there is very interested in having a study group. The institute that put this film together actually has a book and study group materials. So I want you to know that there is something else that can happen here. I know that Karen Marchetti and I believe Joe, you're involved, follow-on workshops about how exactly do you come to this kind of place of reconciliation and bring it into your everyday life. We are filming this because my organization is we have a YouTube channel. And so I will be uploading that, hopefully. Thankfully, Prescott College has volunteered to put that together for us, and I'll be uploading it to our channel. So if you're interested in any or all of these things or any of the follow-on activities that we do through Kenosis Spirit Keepers, please sign up for the newsletter so that you can hear about it. Anyone else?
I was appreciating the comments of the woman in the back, and just briefly, I think the economic injustice is just one of the many ways that we see others as other. And it doesn't take an organized group and rebellion. It can just be in one person's heart or a little group of people's heart, seeing others who are not as deprived as themselves as other. And that's just one of the many ways that we still dehumanize each other and justify things that we do. Mm. When you know they're not hungry as you are, or they have lots of choices that you don't have, it's very hard to maintain the humanity connection, I think. So I appreciated your comments.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I would just like to ask if you have any comments in closing, and you guys might have talked about this when I stepped out to talk to the pizza guy, so if I'm repeating something, then forgive me. This is very much about an individual journey of healing, and a lot of the stories that we're seeing in the film start at a level, way beyond the individual. The governmental systems, political systems, economic injustice, systems of injustice. We're all here tonight at Prescott College, which is an institution of higher learning that focuses on social justice and trying to train young people to go forward and look at systems of injustice in the world and try and make the world a better place and so on and so forth. And I'm wondering if you have any comments for us on the interface between sort of the political systems and these individual journeys relate to one another.
That's a big question, and it's something in my life when I'm seeing the injustice around the world, I'm seeing the oppression, the poverty, genocide, the war. It's like, how do we change? And when I see my government, sadly, just supporting, using violence at the first opportunity and taking away benefits from people, and we have a real problem, I'm sure you have the same here, of poverty right now. And even there's days when I feel quite disheartened. And I think, well, I believe change happens on a grassroots level. And so what's happening in my country right now is the government are being absolutely insensitive and unkind and morally wrong to the refugees. But all around the country, people who would normally not be activists, would not normally do anything other than survive in their life, which we know is hard enough. But people are waking up to the pain and the suffering there. And they're organising in different villages and towns. People are going to Calais with van loads of clothes and food, and it's been organised so people know what's needed. And they're going to Greece. And it's incredible people power. And it's happening. And just before I left, we had an incredible demonstration in London that I went to. And there were people from all ages, all walks of life, all communities, all there, saying, "We welcome you." And that day was the day when the new leader of the Labour Party came out. And it's something I'm sure you haven't heard of, but there were like 6 people were there to be elected. And the person that we got was someone called Jeremy Corbyn. And the first thing he did was come to the demonstration as the leader of a national party, and I heard him speak about opening hearts and caring. You know, and so how did that happen? How did we get a leader of one of our national parties? He's been part of Stop the War campaign for the last 30 years. He's been working to support Palestinians and get their voices heard, and he's completely there for the people. So for me, that's a sign of hope. I know it's a very small sign, but I think it's about people power. And when people start feeling the suffering and move out of their comfort and say, I'm going to do something, and they do it in masses, then we're powerful. And then perhaps we can change our politicians so they reflect what we believe in, which is the justice and the compassion and the equality. So that's my hope, is that people power is going to change those that can make the decisions. And we're heading that way. Let's hope.
I was just noticing the last several months that we're hearing about the refugees, how an individual has something come in their life, and it, as you have had, and they must come to grips with it, and it's not to be avoided, and it will force a huge change. And I'm seeing that with the human race. We had the whole world having these economic issues, you know, everybody bare bones, you know, looking really tough. And suddenly, in the face of all that, you've got all these refugees pounding on the door, needing everything, absolutely everything. And you're not flush, whatever country you are. And I've been thinking how interesting it is that the human race has got this on them right now. People mentioned earlier tonight things reducing you to the basics. And I just can't help but observe this as potentially reducing the human race to their basics again, as you were saying, of compassion.
Yeah.
Thank you. I wanted to take a moment to affirm what has been said about the importance of people power and meetings one-on-one with people from different points of view. And in my life, I am a product of the Cold War, and my father was a career military officer. And in 1987, I went to 5 republics in what was the Soviet Union as part of a group under the auspices of Continuing the Peace Dialogue. That was the name of the organization. And our purpose was to, in fact, meet people and be with them and allow them to be with me. And I think in retrospect, the largest or the most significant awakening on my part from that experience was that my thinking changed. It wasn't so much that, I mean, how would I know if someone else's thinking had changed, someone I had met? But I didn't think in advance about how that would change my life. And it was so profound. And I remember sitting in the apartment of a woman I had met who was a university professor at University of Moscow. And her apartment looked over the whole city of Moscow. And all of a sudden, and she had made lunch for me, which is a big deal because she worked and it meant she had to queue in lines for long hours just to get the food. And all of a sudden, tears were streaming down my face, but they were joyful. I just never dreamed in my lifetime. I couldn't have seen myself sitting in an apartment in Moscow having lunch with the Russian. Do you know what I mean? So in my lifetime, it has been very important to make these choices to take myself out of my comfort zone and be willing to be surprised myself in my own thinking, in my values, and try to stay open to new possibilities.
Well, that was an amazing bridge you built.
I'm sorry?
That was an amazing bridge you built.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
It was mutual.
Yes.
I just wanted to say something more about the power of people and the grassroots. When you look at MAD, or Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and the changes that have come for us on keeping drunk drivers off of the road, it's amazing.
Wow.
Another thing that I thought was so powerful is what they did with the children about pollution, you know, and little kids saying, you can't throw that out, Dad or Grandpa, you know. It's really made some big changes. One other thing I wanted to say, a really neat book along the line of forgiveness that says so much in less than 10 minutes is a book by Neil Donald Walsh. It's called Little Soul in the Sun. And it kind of goes into why did things have to happen. And it just gives a different view of even this man that did the bomb, why that had to happen for you, and where you are now.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you again for being here, Joe. I just had a question. It sounded like you really had this personal journey that you were trying to, you know, open doors and reach a level of freedom from this event. And then at some point, you really started to externalize it and bring it out to the public. And what was that transition like? And it seems like that would have been really a difficult place to be and a decision to make.
It was a really difficult decision to go public. And when we filmed the second meeting and we carried on filming for about 10 months, I was told it could be a documentary after about 4 months. And I was really unsure. You know, I didn't know whether if I went public, I was going to re-traumatize my family, the other people from the bomb who'd been affected, or whether it was going to do good. I really didn't know. And back in 2000, I was coming out of a very difficult marriage, and my self-esteem was very low. And so to have that confidence, this was the right thing to do, was hard. And I think about 2 months before the screening, I just about reached a place where I knew it was going to do some good. And then I went and spoke to all my family. My stepmother, who was injured in the bomb, my 5 siblings, and friends. I wrote to all the family members who lost their loved ones in the bomb, because 5 people were killed. I wrote to the people who were injured, and that was difficult. That was really difficult. But it was interesting that when I spoke to some of my family members, they shared things with me they hadn't shared before. And it became a way of them sharing their story. And then I could protect them for a bit. I would say, I'm going to be on the radio, I'm going to be on the TV, so they would know not to watch if they didn't want to. But then that's been gone for years now. And it's been hard for them. And it's it's amazing, and I think it's a credit to them that we are still very close. There are some people who've accused me of betraying my father, and they say because they loved him, they can't support me. And I really understand that. I understand that kind of betrayal. To me, that's like a kind of tribal betrayal. And for me, the real betrayal is if I betray my own heart. And I went through a lot of emotions to get to that point, because I felt that tribal betrayal, and when I felt it, it was almost like I was being told to not go and meet him. And when I felt those emotions of what that was, and the other side of hours of crying was this knowing that there is no other, there's only my brothers and sisters. And that was an amazing moment. It doesn't mean I haven't felt the betrayal, but I've known what to do with it. You know, and as soon as the documentary that we finished, that was for BBC, people started ringing up and telling me that they got something from it, and we started getting invitations to speak. And it never occurred to me that our sharing was going to have an effect on other people. And obviously it has just sort of grown and grown. But yeah, you're right, that was a really scary moment, like feel the fear and do it anyway. One of those moments, I'm sure you all know about those moments.
Well, great, thanks for sharing.
Great, yeah.
Did Pat operate as a rogue, or were there others? And did the others go through a similar process, if there were more?
Okay, so as far as I know, there were two other men who were with him. And they were never caught, and I don't know their names. And because if Pat mentioned their names, they would have to go to court still. So he won't tell me. And I find that quite frustrating. I've tried, you know. I won't tell anyone. But no, he won't. But it was interesting because I was in Brighton once. I've been in Brighton with him a few times, which is where he planted the bomb. And once we were being filmed for another documentary. And we were walking past the Grand Hotel, and if you see it now, it looks completely, they just rebuilt it, and there's no, you can't tell that the whole thing was blown apart. And Pat became very thoughtful, and he said to me, 3 weeks before I was standing there on this other building looking down, and then I was thinking this, and he said for him being in Brighton that day, it kind of was bringing back some of the memories he had. And I wanted more, you know, I was quite interested. To me, that's sort of part of the story. But after a bit, he sort of stopped talking. But even just to think about what happened to him beforehand, it's just more of the story. And I have said to him, it's a bit mischievous really, but if either of the other two ever want to meet me, I would really welcome that, you know. Like, I don't think it's going to happen. Well, you never know.
Does he not feel conflicted that he's holding this as a justice issue? Is it not talking out of both sides of his mouth?
Can you say a bit more about that?
May I ask you to ask that into the microphone?
My question is, does he not feel conflicted? He has this information, and yet he purports to have this justice thing kind of going on, and that there seems to be some kind of conflict, I would think. Has he ever addressed that?
Well, he has. He is in conflict in himself. There's many things he's conflicted about. He would say that if he was here. But I think he feels absolutely fine in not giving the names of the two other people. He's loyal to them. He's very loyal to the IRA. That's his first loyalty. His loyalty is not to the British justice system. And I think he's fine about that.
It was not, forget the justice system, his own personal sense of justice. His morality.
Yeah, I think he feels fine. You know, they've got their own lives, and he feels fine about that. And he seems to accept that it was okay that he was the one that went to prison and they didn't. He seems fine. I wish we could ask him. We could perhaps Skype him. Maybe I'll ask him that, because I don't totally know. Okay, so. I just want to end with these words, if important, that this is the time when humanity heals together, and being with you all has strengthened my knowing, because you're all doing amazing work, you're incredible people, and this idea of humanity is now healing together, like in the whole world. So thank you all so much.